I watched in horror as my 91-year-old grandmother collapsed into her chair, tears streaming down her face, as 3 armed security guards threatened to cut off her water supply during the 98-degree heat wave. Either pay the $8,500 special assessment by Friday or face immediate eviction, they sneered, confiscating her heart medication for inspection. What they didn't know when they targeted a Korean war veteran's widow, her grandson had spent a decade neutralizing threats as an Army Ranger. Would you believe their next visit would change everything in our community forever? My grandmother Rose wasn't just any resident of Oakwood Estates. She helped build it. As one of the original homeowners from 1962, she and my late grandfather had invested their life savings in this land before developers, before highways, before any HOA existed. They'd worked tirelessly to create a home where they could grow old together and pass on a legacy to their family. At 91, despite her arthritis making every movement a challenge, Rose still tended her award-winning roses that had been featured twice in the local newspaper. Despite her heart condition requiring careful monitoring and medication, she lived independently, refusing to burden anyone. And despite barely making ends meet on her modest pension, she still volunteered weekly at the Veterans Hospital, reading to blind former servicemen. Her home, fully paid off for decades, was her only significant asset and final sanctuary. The walls held 60 years of memories. Raising my father, welcoming grandchildren, celebrating holidays. The small backyard oak tree had been planted when my grandfather returned from Korea. The flagpole displaying the American flag had been his final project before passing 5 years ago. The neighbors all adored Rose. Mrs. Patterson from across the street checked on her daily. The Johnson kids shoveled her walkway in winter without being asked. Mr. Hernandez from 3 doors down drove her to church every Sunday. This wasn't just a neighborhood. It was a community of people who looked after each other. That is, until Michael Townsend moved in and decided that people like my grandmother were standing in the way of neighborhood modernization and property value optimization, as he called it. Little did any of us realize then that Rose's cherished home would become ground zero in a battle against the most despicable form of elder exploitation I'd ever witnessed. Everything changed when Michael Townsend, a slick former hedge fund manager with political connections, orchestrated a technical takeover of the HOA board. By scheduling an emergency meeting during snowbird season when half the elderly residents were away visiting grandchildren or escaping the winter cold, his hand-picked board was elected with just 14% homeowner participation. Their first action? Replacing the community's retired police officer who had provided friendly security for years with Executive Enforcement Solutions, a private firm owned by Townsend's college roommate. The new security team arrived in black tactical gear, equipped with tasers and pepper spray, driving SUVs with spotlights that they'd shine into residents' windows at night for security checks. At the first official meeting under the new board, Townsend unveiled his vision. Oakwood Estates 2.0, a premium living experience. Gone were community potlucks and seasonal decorating contests. In their place came architectural standardization requirements, landscaping mandates, and a list of bylaws so extensive it required a 3-ring binder. When longtime resident Mrs. Wilson asked about cost considerations for fixed-income residents, Townsend's response chilled the room. Premium communities require premium participants. Perhaps some residents might be more comfortable elsewhere. The message couldn't have been clearer to anyone paying attention. The new regime wasn't interested in preserving the community. They were planning to replace it, along with its residents. The initial changes seemed innocent: increased landscaping standards, stricter architectural guidelines, new rules about trash can placement. Most residents, including Rose, tried their best to comply, not wanting to make waves. The security patrols became more frequent, with guards taking photos of properties and making notes on tablets. Then came the announcement that shook the community to its core: an unprecedented $8,500 emergency infrastructure assessment, with just 60 days to pay, no installment options permitted. For working families, this was difficult. For seniors on fixed incomes like Rose, it was catastrophic, nearly half her annual income. At the announcement meeting, the small community center was packed. Townsend presented glossy renderings of essential upgrades, including a gated entrance, decorative water features, and premium landscaping. When 78-year-old Mr. Jenkins, a retired accountant, respectfully asked to review the financial documentation justifying the assessment, what happened next stunned everyone. Two security guards immediately flanked Jenkins. When he stood his ground and cited the HOA bylaws regarding financial transparency, they didn't just silence him, they forcibly removed him, confiscating his cane as a potential weapon. Residents watched in horror through the windows as the elderly man was forced to crawl on hands and knees back to his car in the parking lot. The message was crystal clear. Questions would not be tolerated, and age would receive no respect. Within days, a pattern emerged that was impossible to ignore. While younger homeowners received letters offering flexible payment plans for the assessment, seniors faced aggressive collection tactics that went far beyond normal HOA procedure. Rose began receiving daily inspection notices, citing increasingly absurd violations. Her mailbox was 1.5 inches too low. Her American flag displayed outside authorized hours. Her garden hose improperly coiled. Each violation carried $100 to $250 fines, compounding daily. When she attempted to fix one issue, 2 more violation notices would appear the next morning. The security team seemed to take particular interest in Rose's property. Neighbors reported seeing them parked outside her home for hours, taking photos of everyone who visited. When her church friends came for their weekly Bible study, they received parking violations despite being in her driveway. When her medical delivery service brought her heart medication, the driver was stopped and questioned. Most disturbing was what happened when her Social Security check arrived mid-month. Within hours, before Rose had even checked her mail, 2 security guards appeared at her door, demanding immediate payment toward the assessment. How could they possibly have known about her check's arrival timing? The invasion of privacy was staggering. Other seniors reported similar experiences. Mrs. Abernathy, an 83-year-old widow, was cited for unauthorized wind chimes that had hung on her porch for 15 years. Mr. Gonzalez, a 75-year-old retired firefighter, received violations for his service dog being visible from the street. Mrs. Chun, 88, was fined because her grandson's bicycle was left on her porch for more than the allowed 30 minutes. The security team's tactics became increasingly intimidating. They would enter backyards without permission. They would pound on doors at dinner time. They began scheduling mandatory compliance interviews for elderly residents that could last hours, refusing breaks for medication or restroom use. When Rose called the county aging services for advice, she returned home to find a notice taped to her door. Reporting HOA matters to outside agencies constitutes a violation of community confidentiality standards. Fine, $500. The psychological warfare was calculated and cruel, designed to break the will of people who had survived wars, economic depressions, and personal hardships most couldn't imagine. The situation turned dangerous in July when temperatures soared to record highs. Rose, unable to pay both the mounting assessment fees and her medication costs, had made the impossible choice to prioritize her heart pills. With fines now totaling over $3,000 on top of the unpaid assessment, she was struggling to make even minimum payments on her credit card that she'd reluctantly used for groceries. One morning, she turned on her kitchen faucet to take her medication and found the water reduced to a mere trickle, barely enough to fill a glass after several minutes. Thinking it was a neighborhood issue, she called her neighbor, who confirmed their water was flowing normally. When Rose contacted the county water authority, they explained something chilling. HOA security had installed a flow restrictor on her specific line, claiming authority through an obscure bylaw that had never before been enforced. This came just days after security had attempted to confiscate her monthly prescription delivery, citing a new package inspection policy. This action wasn't just unethical, it was illegal under state utility laws protecting access to water as a fundamental right. With temperatures approaching 100 degrees and her medical condition requiring proper hydration, Rose faced a life-threatening situation engineered by the very organization supposedly protecting community standards. Too proud to admit defeat and unwilling to worry her family, Rose began filling containers at her church's outdoor spigot after Tuesday prayer meetings. despite her severe osteoporosis and heart condition making any physical exertion dangerous. She attempted to carry small water jugs up her driveway, stopping every few steps to catch her breath. Her neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, observed her struggling and immediately called me, finally breaking Rose's weeks of silence about the escalating harassment. When I called the water authority to report the situation, they explained they needed the property owner's permission to enter the property and remove the restrictor. Rose, terrified of further retaliation, initially refused to file a formal complaint. The water authority representative, clearly troubled, confided that Oakwood Estates wasn't the first community where this tactic had been reported. 2 other HOAs managed by people connected to Townsend had used similar methods against elderly residents. That night, Rose suffered dizziness and confusion from dehydration and heat stress. As I helped her drink small sips of water, she broke down, admitting through tears, "They want me gone, and maybe they're right. I don't have the strength to fight anymore." Seeing this proud woman who had survived the Great Depression, outlived 2 cancers, and raised 3 generations reduced to hopelessness lit a fire in me that would never be extinguished. I moved into Rose's guest room that night, making the permanent relocation from my apartment to care for her, though I told her I was just visiting for a few weeks to spare her pride. The next morning, while she rested, I began a thorough inspection of her home, removing the illegal water restrictor first and restoring her full water service. As I checked her phone for possible tampering, I noticed something odd. A small potted plant on the kitchen windowsill seemed slightly off-center from its usual position. Examining it closer, I discovered a small voice recorder hidden in the soil. The security team had been monitoring her private conversations. This wasn't just harassment. It was criminal invasion of privacy. But what I discovered next chilled me to the bone. The recorder hadn't been collected recently and contained not just recordings of Rose's private conversations with friends and her doctor, but also the security team's own conversations when Rose was at medical appointments. I listened in growing horror to their callous discussions. The old lady in 243 is closest to cracking. Her medication costs about $400 monthly, so she'll miss the next assessment payment for sure. Jenkins folded yesterday, signed over his house for 60% of market value just to get out from under the fines. That's 3 this month. Focus pressure on the widow with the roses. Townsend says her corner lot is prime for the duplex conversion in Phase 2. The old nurse is stubborn, but the water restriction usually breaks them within 2 weeks. If that doesn't work, we'll move to Phase 3 compliance measures. The HOA wasn't just enforcing rules, they were conducting tactical psychological warfare against the elderly with military-like precision. This was a calculated campaign to force vulnerable homeowners to surrender their properties. The recorder contained over 40 hours of similar conversations, documenting a conspiracy so callous it defied comprehension. I carefully replaced the recording device exactly as I'd found it, now understanding we needed to gather evidence before confronting them. That evening, I made an excuse about fixing Rose's Wi-Fi and installed hidden cameras throughout her property. One at the front door, one covering the backyard, one in the living room, and motion-activated cameras at all entry points. I also placed a legitimate-looking medical alert button that actually connected to my cell phone, ensuring I'd know instantly if anyone entered while I was away. Rose needed to appear vulnerable while I built a case that would not just stop the harassment but bring the perpetrators to justice. The security team didn't wait long to make their next move. The very next afternoon, while Rose was napping, 2 guards and a person identifying himself as the HOA compliance officer arrived without notice or permission. Their pounding on the door was clearly designed to intimidate. I answered calmly, filming discreetly with my phone in my pocket. "We've detected unauthorized tampering with HOA infrastructure," the compliance officer stated coldly. "The water flow device installed on this property has been removed illegally." "That would be illegal tampering with county water utilities," I replied, "which is a Class A misdemeanor in this state." His confidence faltered momentarily before he recovered. "The HOA has easement rights and utility management authorization under bylaw section." I interrupted his rehearsed speech by holding up my phone, now on speaker with the county water commissioner who I'd contacted that morning. "This is Commissioner Rodriguez. I'm confirming that no private entity, including homeowners associations, has legal authority to restrict utility services in our county. The installation of flow restrictors without county authorization constitutes criminal tampering with critical infrastructure under State Code 31. For 22. My office has opened an investigation into this matter. The blood drained from their faces as they realized their actions had been documented and reported to authorities. Without another word, they retreated to their vehicle and drove away. Rose, who had witnessed the exchange from the hallway, broke into a relieved smile, the first I'd seen since arriving. This small victory taught me something crucial. These bullies operated through intimidation and counting on residents' ignorance of their legal rights. When confronted with actual authority and documentation, they backed down quickly. More importantly, I realized this wasn't random harassment or overzealous rule enforcement. This was a systematic operation targeting specific residents. That evening, I explained everything to Rose, showing her the recording device and the evidence I'd gathered. Rather than frightening her, the knowledge seemed to reignite her spirit. "Your grandfather always said knowledge is the best weapon," she said, squeezing my hand. "Let's find out exactly what we're fighting." We were no longer just defending her home, we were going to expose the entire operation. Using skills honed during military intelligence operations, I began investigating the board's finances and property records. The emergency infrastructure assessment had raised over $2.1 million from the community's 248 homes. Yet public records showed no permits filed for major infrastructure work, no contractor bids, no evidence of any actual project underway. What I did find was disturbing. Property records showed that 14 homes previously owned by seniors had been purchased in the past 6 months at an average of 40% below market value by Oakwood Revival LLC, a shell company I traced through state business filings to an offshore entity. Further investigation revealed the offshore company's registered agent was Townsend's former law partner. The pattern was becoming clear. Target cash-poor but equity-rich seniors with financial pressure and harassment until they sold in desperation. Classic predatory real estate tactics with a privatized enforcement arm. Even more disturbing, I discovered nearly identical patterns in 2 other communities across the state where Townsend had previously served on HOA boards. A college friend now working at the county records office helped me access the Planning Commission's future development documents. There it was in black and white, a proposal pre-filed by Oakwood Revival LLC to rezone the entire community from single-family residential to high-density luxury condominiums, with construction phase to begin precisely in the areas where seniors were being most aggressively targeted. The infrastructure assessment wasn't funding improvements, it was financing a hostile takeover of the community. The money was likely being used to purchase properties while simultaneously making it impossible for many original residents to remain. It was gentrification through intimidation. I carefully documented everything, creating backup copies stored securely outside Rose's home. I also discovered something that made my blood run cold. The HOA had secretly placed liens on properties with unpaid assessments, including Rose's home, despite state law requiring formal notification to homeowners before such action. This wasn't just unethical, it was criminal conspiracy, wire fraud, and elder abuse. But I needed more evidence connecting the security team's tactics directly to the board's instructions before approaching authorities. If we moved too soon with insufficient evidence, these well-connected individuals might escape justice. The answer came from an unexpected source the very next day. Rose had worn a medical alert pendant for years following a fall in her bathroom. The subscription service provided peace of mind that help was just a button press away if her heart condition caused problems when she was alone. One morning, while performing her monthly test, she discovered the system wasn't working. The customer service representative was puzzled, explaining that their records showed the base unit had been disconnected yesterday at 2:17 p.m., precisely when Rose had been at her weekly doctor's appointment. Someone had been in her home. A chill ran down my spine. I checked the hidden camera footage and saw exactly what had happened. 2 security guards had entered without permission using a master key. They methodically disconnected her medical alert system, placing a small HOA violation notice beside it claiming it violated HOA wireless transmission policies. They then proceeded to search through her desk drawers and medication cabinet before leaving. This wasn't just breaking and entering. This crossed the line from harassment to endangerment of human life. If Rose had a medical emergency, seconds could mean the difference between life and death. The calculated cruelty was breathtaking. I reconnected her system and then began reaching out to other elderly residents. 3 others reported similar tampering with medical devices, disconnected alert systems, missing backup battery packs for oxygen concentrators. Even one case where a specially installed bathroom grab bar had been removed and replaced with a violation notice for unauthorized bathroom modifications. Through a community Facebook group, I connected with Jessica, a sympathetic staff member at the security company who was disturbed by what she was witnessing. At great personal risk, she secretly provided me with internal memos directing guards to discourage age-in-place technology as it complicates property transition timelines, and instructions to accelerate compliance measures against residents identified on the priority transition list. A document containing the names of 17 elderly residents, with my grandmother's name at the top. The callous disregard for human life was staggering. Jessica also confirmed my suspicions. Guards were instructed to time their visits to coincide with Social Security and pension deposit dates, and they received bonuses for each property that was sold under pressure. Some of them call it granny hunting, she told me, disgust evident in her voice. I can't be part of this anymore. I realized we couldn't fight this battle alone. The predators counted on isolating vulnerable residents, making each feel like they were the only ones being targeted. It was time to break that isolation and build a coalition. Using Rose's church connections and working through trusted neighbors, I organized a secret meeting at the VFW hall 5 miles away, outside HOA jurisdiction where security couldn't monitor attendees. We carefully avoided electronic communications that might be intercepted, relying on word-of-mouth invitations through trusted channels. Exactly 37 seniors and their family members attended, many visibly nervous about potential retaliation. This represented nearly all the elderly residents still remaining in Oakwood Estates. One by one, they shared stories that formed a damning pattern. Mrs. Abernathy described prescription deliveries confiscated for package policy violations, forcing her to go without critical medication for days. Mr. Freeman, an 84-year-old with emphysema, recounted security guards citing his oxygen equipment as medical waste improperly visible from street level. The Wilsons, both in their late 70s, had contractors turned away while attempting critical electrical repairs, citing unapproved vendor regulations that didn't exist in the actual bylaws. The daughter of 93-year-old veteran Thomas Rodriguez brought documentation showing her father had been fined for his wheelchair ramp, despite ADA protections specifically overriding HOA restrictions. Jennifer Wilson, a paralegal whose mother had been forced to sell 6 months earlier, brought property records showing 29 seniors had been pushed out of 3 HOA communities where Townsend's associates operated. In each case, the properties were purchased by shell companies at 30 to 50% below market value, then quickly resold at full market price once renovated. The room fell silent as we realized the scale of the operation. This wasn't random harassment, it was organized criminal activity targeting the most vulnerable members of multiple communities, implemented systematically over years. Together, we formed the Oakwood Preservation Alliance. Each member had specific responsibilities: documenting violations, checking on vulnerable neighbors daily, providing transportation to ensure no one was isolated. The Wilson family offered their vacation cabin as safe temporary housing for anyone facing immediate crisis. Most importantly, we contacted state elder abuse investigators, the FBI's Real Estate Fraud Division, and a Pulitzer-winning journalist specializing in housing discrimination. The authorities agreed to build their case discreetly while we gathered more evidence and protected residents from immediate harm. With authorities building their case behind the scenes, we implemented a comprehensive protection network for vulnerable residents. Volunteers worked in shifts to ensure seniors weren't alone during security inspections. Family members installed backup medical alert systems disguised as ordinary household items. Every interaction with security was documented, photographed, and added to our growing evidence file. I helped Rose file formal complaints with state regulatory agencies for each violation of law we documented: the illegal water restriction, unauthorized entry, tampering with medical equipment. We also submitted official requests for ADA accommodations for her heart condition, creating a paper trail that would later prove crucial in demonstrating the HOA's discriminatory practices. Our network of allies grew. A retired judge in the community provided guidance on documenting evidence properly. A former prosecutor advised on which statutes were being violated. The local fire marshal, disturbed by reports of disabled safety equipment, began his own quiet investigation into code violations. When security guards realized they were now being recorded and witnessed during every interaction, their behavior temporarily improved, but the board's pressure intensified. They announced a special meeting with mandatory attendance for all residents with outstanding assessment balances, promising immediate resolution options for compliance issues. The thinly veiled threat was clear: pay up or face consequences. We prepared our most vulnerable members for the confrontation. Each senior was paired with a younger family member or volunteer. Everyone had recording devices and knew their legal rights. Our legal advisors would be present to intervene if intimidation tactics were employed. What the HOA didn't realize was that this meeting wasn't their opportunity to pressure residents. It was our opportunity to document their tactics in a public setting with witnesses. We had positioned friendly attendees throughout the audience with instructions to ask specific questions that would force the board to either lie publicly or admit to their scheme. The night before the meeting, Rose and I reviewed our strategy one final time. She seemed stronger than she had in weeks, her fighting spirit rekindled by the knowledge she wasn't alone. Your grandfather always said that bullies count on people being too afraid to stand together, she told me. Tomorrow we show them just how wrong they are about this community. Neither of us could have predicted how dramatically events would unfold the next day. The morning of the meeting, Rose wasn't feeling well after a nearly sleepless night, worrying about the confrontation ahead. I insisted she rest while I finalized preparations, promising to wake her with enough time to get ready. What happened next would change everything. While Rose napped and I was in the kitchen preparing lunch, the front door suddenly opened without a knock. 3 security guards, led by their commander Brock, entered uninvited. Seeing me, they hesitated momentarily before Brock recovered and declared they were conducting a mandatory pre-meeting assessment inspection. When I demanded to see their legal authority to enter without permission, Brock smirked and pointed to his badge. HOA security doesn't need permission, especially for delinquent properties scheduled for lien proceedings. The commotion woke Rose, who appeared in the hallway looking fragile and disoriented. Seeing the guards, her hand went to her chest, a warning sign of her heart condition responding to stress. When I moved to help her to a chair, one guard blocked my path while Brock began loudly listing her violations and demanding immediate payment arrangements. "That's enough," I stated firmly, helping Rose sit down. "You're leaving now. This is private property and you have no legal right to be here." "Your grandmother's time here is finished," Brock responded coldly, removing a document from his tactical vest. "This is notice of immediate lien proceedings. The board has authorized accelerated collection measures due to repeated compliance failures." I escorted Rose back to her bedroom despite their protests, ensuring she took her medication and asking her to rest while I handled the situation. When I returned, I firmly directed them to exit the house and speak with me outside. On the front lawn, precisely as captured in the thumbnail image, the 3 guards surrounded me in an intimidation formation they'd clearly used before. The confrontation that had been brewing for weeks finally erupted. "This community is upgrading its standards, and people like her don't fit anymore," Brock declared, jabbing his finger into my chest. "Nobody's coming to help her or you. We run this place now, and we decide who stays and who goes." His finger jabbed again, harder. "Last chance to cooperate before we make things very uncomfortable for both of you. What happened next would be captured on multiple cameras and change the community forever." "That's where you're wrong," I replied calmly, not backing away despite the 3 men invading my personal space. "I'm her grandson, and I'm stopping you right here." Brock laughed dismissively. "You and what army, tough guy?" I allowed myself the smallest smile. "I don't need an army. I have something more powerful: evidence, witnesses, and the full force of federal law enforcement. On signal, 3 unmarked vehicles that had been parked down the street pulled up to the curb. Doors opened to reveal agents from the FBI's Elder Fraud Division and state investigators who had been monitoring the situation. Simultaneously, curtains moved in houses up and down the street as neighbors emerged onto porches and lawns, cell phones recording everything. Mrs. Patterson, Rose's church friends, even the teenage boys from 3 doors down, all positioned as witnesses to whatever happened next. Brock's hand moved toward his taser as the other guards stepped back uncertainly. I remained perfectly still, maintaining eye contact. I wouldn't recommend that. Not with federal agents watching and 47 cameras currently recording your actions. I produced a folder containing documentation of their illegal activities, the unauthorized entry logs, water tampering evidence, medical alert sabotage, and financial records connecting the security company to the fraudulent property scheme. Michael Townsend's operation has been under federal investigation for 9 weeks. I informed them as the color drained from their faces. Elder exploitation across state lines makes this a federal crime with mandatory minimum sentences. Your inspection today just added witness intimidation and attempted battery of a federal witness to the charges. The FBI agent approached, showing her badge. Mr. Brock Marshall, we have a warrant to search your company vehicles and electronic devices in connection with wire fraud, conspiracy, and civil rights violations under the Elder Justice Act. Please step away from the property owner and keep your hands visible. The neighborhood watched in stunned silence as the untouchable security team was disarmed and separated for questioning. Several residents approached with flash drives and envelopes containing their own evidence of harassment, which investigators gratefully accepted. Rose watched from her bedroom window, tears streaming down her face. Not tears of fear this time, but of vindication. The predators had become the prey, and the community had found its strength. The investigation uncovered the full conspiracy, and it was more extensive than even we had imagined. The infrastructure assessment money, totaling over $2.3 million from 3 communities, had funded nothing related to community improvements. Instead, financial records revealed transfers to offshore accounts linked to luxury purchases, Townsend's 54-foot yacht, HOA revenue, a ski chalet in Aspen, and a significant investment in a Caribbean resort development. The security company had been operating without proper licensing, employing individuals with criminal records, including several with prior charges of elder abuse and financial exploitation. Their training manual, entered as evidence, included sections on psychological compliance techniques and accelerated transition protocols, euphemisms for the systematic harassment of targeted residents. Most damning was the discovery of Townsend's investor presentation on a seized laptop. Titled Silver to Gold, Converting Aging Demographics to Luxury Market Upside, it detailed their 5-year strategy to systematically remove seniors from valuable properties in targeted communities, complete with timelines, profit projections, and obstacle removal strategies. It revealed the calculated cruelty behind what residents had experienced. The FBI's Financial Crimes Unit froze assets worth $4.2 million across 12 shell companies. State prosecutors filed 37 criminal charges against board members and security executives, exactly matching the number of elderly residents who had attended our VFW meeting. When search warrants were executed at Townsend's office, investigators discovered similar operations planned for 5 additional communities targeting veteran and senior populations. What had seemed like isolated incidents of HOA overreach was revealed as an organized criminal enterprise operating across 3 states, with exactly 62 identified victims in total. The case made national headlines as the HOA Predator Scheme. Major news networks covered the arrests and the community's story of resistance. Seniors who had been forced out before our intervention came forward with similar experiences, expanding the case to include over 60 victims. Townsend and 3 board members received federal prison sentences for conspiracy, fraud, and elder exploitation. The security company's executives faced additional charges for wiretapping, unauthorized practice of law, and impersonating government officials. Assets seized during the investigation were designated for victim restitution. Rose testified at the sentencing hearing, her dignified presence silencing the courtroom as she described feeling like a prisoner in the home my husband built with his own hands. She spoke not just for herself but for an entire generation who had built communities only to find themselves treated as obstacles to profit. "We didn't ask for luxury amenities or premium experiences," she told the court. "We only wanted to live with dignity in the homes we worked our entire lives to secure." The true value of a community isn't measured in property values. It's measured in how it treats its most vulnerable members. The judge's ruling included the largest elder abuse civil penalties in state history, stating that preying upon seniors is not just a violation of law but a betrayal of the social contract upon which ordered society depends. Every resident who had been victimized received full restitution plus damages. Today, Rose serves as honorary chairperson of the new resident-led HOA board, which implemented the Rose Rule, ensuring all policy changes must be evaluated for their impact on aging residents. The recovered funds established a community assistance program helping seniors with home maintenance and medical emergencies. The homes that had been purchased under duress were returned to their original owners when possible, with financial compensation for those who had already relocated. The community center now hosts weekly senior support groups and financial literacy workshops to prevent future exploitation. Most importantly, state legislators passed the Oakwood Protection Act, requiring HOA security to be licensed, trained in elder sensitivity, and prohibited from enforcing rules selectively based on age or ability. HOAs must now provide payment plans for all assessments and face strict transparency requirements for all financial decisions. For neighboring communities have already adopted similar reforms, and a national advocacy organization now offers resources for seniors facing HOA conflicts based on our experience. "My military service taught me that true strength isn't measured by how you treat the powerful, but how you protect the vulnerable." What happened at Oakwood Estates wasn't about bylaws or property values. It was about whether we still believe in the American promise that hard work and dedication earn you the right to live with dignity in your final years. The greatest weapon against tyranny isn't found on a battlefield. It's found in communities willing to stand together and declare, "Not here, not now, not to our elders, not ever."